There have been many accidents involving climbers or hikers in the mountains of Russia over the past 50 years, some more tragic than others. But if you type Russian mountain accident into a search engine and hit enter, the first result is likely to be that of a case that happened more than 60 years ago. The case is known as the Dyatlov Pass incident, where involved hikers were found in unnatural and mysterious conditions: torn tent, missing tongue, cracked skulls, and missing clothes. These are only some of the factors that made this case one of the eeriest adventure mysteries in history. The story began on January 27, 1959. Under the approval of Sverdlovsk Region Tourist Route Commission, a group of 9 college students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute and 1 sports instructor who fought in World War II went on a 16 to 18 days journey to reach the peak of Ortorten, a mountain in the northern Urals of Soviet Russia. They were led by the 23-year-old Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov, a 5th-year student in the Faculty of Radio Engineering. Early on that Tuesday, the group set off wearing layers of thick winter clothing, laden with heavy bags and clutching at their ski poles. The route they were taking was dangerous during that time of year. It was classified Category 3, the riskiest category, with temperatures falling as low as -30 degrees Celsius. But all of them were experienced hikers and seasoned cross-country and downhill skiers, and so they had no problem trekking up the freezing mountain. The next day after they left, one of the students, Yuri Yudin, developed joint pain. He decided to return while the rest of the group continued. The following sequence of events were pieced together using the diaries and camera films recovered from the hikers' belongings. Apparently, in the next 4 days, the remaining members of the expedition would continue to make headway until they arrived at the then unnamed pass leading to Ortorten. As they made their way up, they encountered a snowstorm and the visibility dropped, causing the team to lose their sense of direction. They accidentally went west, where they ended up on a slope of a nearby mountain. Not wanting to lose their altitude, the team decided to cut into the slope and pitched up a large tent where they spent the night. And then, the group was never heard from again. The 9 hikers were supposed to show up at the village of Visi on February 14th, where they would write a telegram reporting their hiking progress to their sports club. But the appointed time came and went, and the group failed to show. 2 weeks later, a search party was finally sent out to search for them. University student Mikhail Shiravin was a member of that party. On February 26, the party found themselves on the slope of Kaletsiyakl, interpreted as Death Mountain in the language of the region's indigenous Mansi people. 300 meters from the top of Mount Halachal, Shiravin, together with some of the rescuers, spotted a corner of the tent sticking out of the snow. When they went to investigate, they found that the tent still had the personal belongings of the hikers. Supplies were also littered about, including a flask of vodka, a map, and a plate of sallow or cured white pork fat. On the side of the tent was a slash, suggesting that someone may have cut their way out using a knife. Further observations found sets of footprints leading away from the shelter, indicating that some of the hikers had ventured out in sub-zero temperatures barefoot or with only a single boot and socks. All these were perplexing to the 11 rescuers. Even the guides were all unable to make sense of it. In the end, the party decided to toast to the missing group's safety with the flask found in their tent. Later on in an interview, Shiravin would recall how one of the rescuers had turned to him just before they drank their vodka. The man said, "Best not drink to their health, but to their eternal peace." The next day, military and police investigators were sent up to aid with the search. At the edge of the forest, beneath an old Siberian cedar tree, they found the remains of a small fire and 2 bodies clad only in socks and underwear. They were Yuri Krivonyshenko, 23, and Yuri Doroshenko, 21. Both of their hands were scraped badly, and above them, the branches of the cedar tree were broken in places. Doroshenko was also brown-purple in complexion, with gray foam coming from his right cheek and gray liquid coming from his mouth. The next 3 bodies they found were those of Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22, and Ruslan Slobodin, 23. They were outside of the woods, but still a considerable distance from the tent. It was assumed that they succumbed to the cold on their way back to their shelter. Like the first 2 bodies, there was also something peculiar in the remains of Kolmogorova and Slobodin. Komogorova had a baton-shaped bruise on her side, while Slobodin had head injuries consistent with someone falling and hitting their head over and over again. Despite all of these oddities, the investigators ruled the death of the 5 as due to hypothermia. The 4 remaining hikers were harder to find. It took 2 months before the rescuers uncovered them 75 meters deeper in the woods. They were buried beneath the thawing snow in the ravines. The state of their bodies were even more horrific than those of the other members of the group. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, 23, had significant skull damage. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, had major chest fractures similar to the injuries resulting from a car crush. Ludmila Dubinina, 20, whose body was found on her knees with her face and chest pressed to the rock, had the most gruesome injuries. Her chest cavities were fractured, but even worse, Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of her skull bone. Nearby, they also found Alexander Kolivatov, 24, but his body was in a relatively better condition than the rest, with not much severe wounds. The conditions with which they found the second group of bodies suggested that they may have perished at different times, though there wasn't much evidence to support this except that the hikers seemed to have taken the clothes of the people who have died before them. For example, Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivonishenko's wool pants, suggesting that she had taken it from him earlier, and later, when she met her demise, Zolotaryov then made use of her faux fur coat and hat. Further, Kolivatov and Dubinina's clothes were also found to be radioactive, which added more mystery to the already baffling and unexplainable course of events. The horrific story of the group quickly became famous, and countless theories about the cause of their deaths were put forward. During the investigation, the Sverdlovsk Region Prosecutor's Office examined more than 70 of these theories, including UFO sightings, which the office ruled as nothing but illusions, a missile test, which they rejected even though missile launches were indeed carried out from the Kaputsin Yar training range. It was not visible from the pass. A nuclear explosion that they dismissed because no traces of radiation were found on the hikers' personal belongings. The hurricane and earthquake theories also fell through as there was no evidence of either happening on that fateful night in February. Many Soviets also suspected the local Mansi tribesmen, but this group of indigenous people were relatively peaceful. Additionally, the damage done to the bodies of the hikers far exceeded the blunt force trauma that a human could ever inflict on another. The only remaining theory left was that an avalanche unexpectedly happened. This makes sense if we consider that the hikers may have heard the roaring sound of the snow collapsing, scaring them into leaving their tent in various states of undress as they run to the woods for safety. An avalanche would also have been powerful enough to inflict the injuries that killed the second group of hikers. However, the physical evidence of an avalanche just wasn't there. There was no debris, and no trees were damaged, which would have been impossible if tons of snow and ice had rolled down the slopes and chased the hikers into the forest. In the end, on May 28, 1959, just a few weeks after the last of the bodies were found, the Sverdlovsk Region's Prosecutor's Office closed the case, putting the vague, a spontaneous force that humans were unable to overcome as the likely cause of death. The relatives of the deceased were of course unable to accept this conclusion. According to Yevgeny Chernosev, a lawyer appointed with the public fund in memory of the Dyatlov group, the investigation did not in fact produce any result. The investigation itself was unlawful as it had been closed, and only a part of an open criminal case that probes and checks can be conducted. The head of the Dyatlov Group Memorial Fund, Yuri Kuntsevich, agreed with him. The man vowed that the fund would seek to have an investigation into the death of the young hikers officially reopened. Over the next 61 years, the prosecutor office would continue to receive queries not only from the relatives of the deceased, but also from the media and the general public, asking the office to determine the truth and to not hide anything from them. Finally, in 2019, the Russian officials reopened the case for a new investigation, but they noted that they would only consider 3 theories: an avalanche, a snow slab, or a hurricane. On July 11, 2020, Andrei Kuryakov, deputy head of the Urals Federal District Directorate of the Prosecutor General's Office, announced the result of the investigation. An avalanche triggered by a sudden change of weather was what destroyed the lives of the hikers. The avalanche caused the hikers to rush out from their tent. They then went to the woods and built a fire that lasted a mere hour and a half. 2 of the members suffered from frostbite and perished right there. The rest decided to split up, with one group being led by Dyatlov and the other by instructor Zolotarev. Dyatlov's group crawled back to the tent, but the temperature was -45 degrees Celsius and there was a biting wind. Their group quickly froze up. On the other hand, Zolotarev's group also struggled towards their tent, but they triggered another movement in the slope and were thrown off to their deaths, buried under 3 meters of snow. This is what caused the violent injuries, Kuryakov concluded. This explanation was barely enough to satisfy the public. In the end, this was just another theory that will never be proven. To this day, the great mystery of what is now known as the Dyatlov Pass incident is still ever enduring. It's still being talked about, and many theories and conspiracies are still plentiful. But this mystery is perhaps one that will never be solved in history. The only ones who would know of what truly happened in that mountain pass are those in Mikhailov Cemetery at Yekaterinburg, lying peacefully beneath a monument that was erected in their honor. If you have followed this story to this point, I would like to say a big thank you. If you like this kind of story, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment below. For more of this type of content, please click on the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you will be notified when another video is posted. Until next time, be cautious and don't ever lose your sense of wonder.